to the CAMC Foundation Hospitality House. My name is Mary Estep and I am the manager here. Thank you for joining us for the Food Fantasy Trip. Let's get started. Remember, peace, love, and food.
Hello, I'm Chef Paul, and we are here at the CAMC Foundation Hospitality House. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about ingredients. So my philosophy is buy as much local produce and the best quality ingredients that you can and do as little to them as possible. So today we're going to be cooking some frittatas, veggie frittatas, and a clafouti. So I'm going to talk about peaches. Peaches are right now in season. So hopefully we are going to do, these are cling peaches, and then these are the stone-free peaches. So we are very excited about those. Another great feather in our cap in this area is Hernshaw Farms mushrooms. We use them at both restaurants on our pizzas and also as a feature on one of our entrees at 1010. So George Patterson has done these mushrooms on reclaimed mine sites in storage containers. These are so beautiful. They are honestly the best mushrooms that I have used ever. So you can buy these at the Capital Market online. You can buy kits to actually grow them yourself at Kroger or online as well. Also at the Capital Market, which is where I do a lot of my shopping. We've got from John Critchfield, we've got peppers. Grits Farms, we've got onions. Also, we have zucchini and squash. All of these things we're going to be using today. Now, there is a huge difference in the taste and the quality. If you go to Kroger, not that I'm deterring you from going to any shopping center, but there is a huge difference. And also supporting local, for me, is the most important thing. Community is the most important thing. I cheat a little bit sometimes. We've got some value-added products. So we've got our local blue smoke. This started in Anstead, West Virginia. It is absolutely fantastic. So I use this in meatloafs, chilies. We're going to use it in our frittata today, kind of make it a little Southwest frittata. Also, our Yoder's Jam, another great West Virginia product. This one is their clover honey. So we're going to use this in our clafouti to sweeten it up a little bit. So when we're talking about local ingredients, it is a must to talk about JQ Dickinson Salt. So this, if not the best, is one of the best salts in the world. And it's right here in West Virginia, 5 miles down the road in Malden. So this whole area, it was founded on salt. And the Dickinson family was one of about 100 plus salt mines that were in this area. So the Payne family, which is a descendant of and a relation to the Dickinson family, Lewis and Nancy revitalized this salt making process. So there is an ancient ocean that runs underneath Malden. They drill down, they pull up this salt water, and then let Mother Nature take its course. And I tell you what, it is the best salt that I have ever used. I use it exclusively in everything. Not only is it great to have the salt, but the family does so much philanthropy in town. The Dickinson family actually created and founded the endowment that made this whole house possible. So thank you from me and from everybody to the Dickinson family for providing this wonderful salt. And last but certainly not least is our Lenz Creek lavender. So this is actually grown on the same land as the mushrooms. And the great thing about this lavender, I don't know if it's the soil or the different plant, but it is not super, lavender goes a long way. So this one's not super soapy. It is absolutely fantastic. We use it in a lot of different things from honeys to butters to creme brulees at 1010. So today we are going to do a frittata. We're also going to do a dessert frittata. Basically, it's a clafouti. So it sounds really cool. Both of these are very easy. If we use our local ingredients, It is very easy to do, and we are very excited to be here. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Paul Smith here at the CAMC Foundation Hospitality House. Today I'm going to be cooking. Wanted to tell you a little bit about me. I am a local restaurateur, born and raised here in Charleston, West Virginia. I have two restaurants, 1010 Bridge, which is a local Appalachian, kind of farm to table. I say it's Appalachian cuisine with a low country influence. Also have The Pitch, which is a sports bar in the Shawnee Sports Complex. So both restaurants are focused on, number one, community supportive and supported, and local ingredients. So today we are going to be talking a little bit about our local ingredients. I'm going to be cooking. I also wanted to say how important it is to have a house like this. You know, my wife is a cancer survivor. Fortunately, we were close enough that we didn't need something like this. But there are many families that have to travel into town with our great CAMC, whatever you're doing, if you're ill, cancer, whatever it is, this is more geared towards adults that come. And I think that, you know, if anything has taught me over the last year how important it is to have family around you and to share a meal with your family, it is that. You know, we opened both restaurants during COVID. We saw the importance of family and the family dynamic and supporting local and the local community during this tough year, and really how it kind of brought us all together. So I think this house, as well as our restaurants and our community, are really focused on that community and food. You know, I think that sometimes food just makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. So today we're going to be cooking a frittata. Got some local mushrooms here. So we're gonna, you know, these are from Hernshaw Farms. And really one of my biggest things is how to cook mushrooms properly. So I usually don't even really cut these. I just kind of rip them. And the huge part is, and if you ask any of our cooks, this is a huge passion of mine. So we get our pan hot, very, very hot. We put the mushrooms in and then don't touch them. That is one of the biggest things with, not only, you know, mushrooms are a protein. So we want to have that protein browning or that Maillard reaction, just as you would a chicken breast or a steak. You know, all that flavor comes from the outside and that protein browning. So like your grill marks on your steak, that nice sear on your chicken breast, the sear on your scallops, all of these things come from the browning of the protein. Now, when we're talking a little bit later, when we're putting our mushrooms in there, when we're putting our onions in there, we talk about caramelization. So those are the two different things. But really, it's all just about developing these flavors. So we got our mushrooms in there. We're going to talk a little bit about where we buy most of our produce comes from either the Capital Market or the local farms. We have a great farm collective called Turn Row Farms. So they help us source from different farms. So all of these vegetables either come from the Capital Market or from Turn Row. Those two things alone, along with this great house, are things that, you know, I have had the pleasure and the fortunate ability to travel around the country, Napa, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and, you know, these types of resources we just don't have everywhere. So I try to buy and use as local as possible and do as little to it as possible, right? So you buy your seasonal ingredients, you add a little bit of JQ Dickinson salt to it, let the ingredient speak for itself, and just try not to mess it up. So really, it's about the proper technique. And if you notice, so I put in the mushrooms first to get them nice and caramelized, a little bit of that brown on there. I put our zucchini and our squash in there next. I'm gonna do the peppers, because we're doing kind of I guess it would be a vegetable frittata, but also we're gonna add a little bit of a Southwest flair to it. So peppers, and we're just slicing first and then turn it over. We're doing a little small dice. In culinary school, it was always super fun when the chefs came around and measured our cuts. So trust me, I won't be doing this to you, but I do it to my chefs in the restaurants just because I'm a little sadistic like that. So we've got our red pepper. We'll do our green pepper too. It's important also to mention that, when you're dealing with peppers, obviously the green pepper and the red pepper, they don't have any capsaicin to them. It's really just for that pepper flavor. But if you're dealing with something that is a little hotter, you want to make sure to take the seeds out, and also the white membranes, that's also where some of that heat will come from. So you could just take your knife, just kind of slide it off right there. Also, if you're working in a fine dining French restaurant, you will square everything off properly. You will make sure to take all the white off, and then obviously cut them 100% perfect. But in my restaurants, we focus on kind of a little bit more rustic, a little bit more Appalachian. Obviously it's Nouveau Appalachian, but still, adding that kind of that rustic feel and a little bit more accessibility. So we've got those. While we're going to do the onion, I'm going to show you a little trick with onions. So 2 different ways. So I got these onions are great. They're already peeled. These come from Grits Farms. So when you're doing an onion, you want to take the top off so you have a flat surface. Discard that. Now in the restaurant, with all these scraps, we do vegetable stock. You could also do this at your house or here. If you're slicing or dicing, you cut the onion directly down. I'll put one aside. So then take that first little bit of peel out of there. And then there's 2 different methods. So we're going to be dicing for this. So you want to go kind of at a rounded angle, and you want to just go down about as thick as the desired thickness of your dice, but we're not going all the way through. And then you go all the way down to the other side, palm down, fingers up, just do one nice cut straight through it. And then you got your dice. So this will save you, if you're in our kitchen and we're doing 50 pounds of onions a day, it definitely saves you some time. We're not going to do this whole onion because obviously onions are a little strong. We're going to add those in. I'm going to move these back to the little channel here. While we're doing this, I'm just going to show you a little bit of a slice, and this is a good trick just to have in your back pocket. So if you're slicing an onion, as opposed to a dice, if you're dicing, you keep the knob on. If you're slicing, you take the knob off. Obviously take the peel off again. And then you want to go all the way through, but just down. Now the difference is we're going all the way through in kind of a rocking motion. We also have the knob that's gone so it releases. So you get about, halfway through, and then flip the onion down. Again, when you're holding a knife, you want to pinch the knife. You want your fingers to be up right on the actual blade of the knife, so it becomes a little bit more of a part of your hand as opposed to an extension of your fingers. That gives you a little bit more control. Also, you don't want to put your finger up on the blade like this. I know a lot of people do, a lot of chefs in the kitchens do as well. What that does is it puts a little bit more pressure on your tendon right here, And if you're using your knife as much as I am, you can really hurt yourself eventually. So pinch, fingers, this hand, you want to go right off this middle knuckle here. Keep your thumb in the back because obviously our thumbs are very important. Kind of separates us from animals. And then we go straight down. So when you get to the point where you're super comfortable with it, or you're doing 50, 100 pounds a day for a couple months, you can just kind of follow that knuckle down and that just use your guide and you don't even really need to look at it. So I'm going to put these again over here since we're not going to use those. Get all of our extra things here out of the way. This is also a really good time to mention that since the next thing that we're going to do is a dessert quiche or a clafouti, think about what you have cut on your board. So there's a couple of different things that I'd like to talk about here. Number one is food safety. So if you cut something raw on your cutting board, which it would be chicken, beef, fish, something like that, use a different cutting board, take that, wash it, completely come back. But if we're going to be cutting some peaches, think about what you have cut on that cutting board as well. Because if you cut peaches after you cut onions, then your dessert quiche kind of tastes like your Southwestern quiche, which isn't necessarily what you want. So I'm going to stir this up just a little bit. You hear, when we're cooking, you want to hear, you want to smell, you want to see, you want to taste. You're really using all of your senses, right? So you hear that nice sear, that nice sizzle. We also have these awesome Le Creuset pans that I got. My wife's in Charleston, South Carolina, and they have one of their factories down there. So we went over and grabbed those. It's always nice to have the proper tools to cook with. So while that is softening up and cooking, I'm going to grab our eggs and our cream. Now you can use milk if you are, a little bit more health conscious, in kitchens. Obviously, I was French trained, so I can put cream and butter on anything and really prefer to. So we'll use the side of the bowl or use your cutting board or a flat surface. It will allow you to get a little less of the shell in there. If you use a kind of the side of your counter or whatever, it breaks the shell just a little bit and it will, you tend to get a little bit more shell in the mixture as opposed to where it is. And no one really wants that kind of roughage in our diet. So I am going to do the eggs. So a good thought is 8 eggs thickens up a quart of cream. So we've got 8 eggs. So we're basically making kind of either a scrambled egg or, you can do this. This is, what we're doing here is a frittata. So I'm going to break the eggs up and the yolks up first, get those good, and then I'm just going to add my heavy whipping cream to it. Again, you can use milk, you could use skim milk. You probably want to use some sort of dairy. I wouldn't use anything else because it's just going to be obviously a little strange. Now you could do it without as well. I think that the heavy cream really just adds that mouthfeel to it. Obviously we're going to use our JQ Dickinson salt. I mean, this is really the only salt that I use. It's the only salt to use. If you use any other salt, just try to use kosher salt as opposed to iodized. Iodized does have that iodine flavor and it does taste a little off to me. We don't necessarily need a lot of iodine in our diet anymore. We get it from other areas. So I'm going to put a decent amount, about a tablespoon of salt in there, because if you've noticed, I haven't salted the veggies yet. I'm going to actually salt those as well. So when we're doing things like this, what we're doing is we're layering the flavors, right? We salt the veggies, we salt the egg mixture, We're gonna add a little cracked black pepper as well. Now you could use white pepper. A lot of times, you know, in our finer dining kitchens, you'll use white pepper with things like mashed potatoes, things like fish, and things like this, if you didn't have all the veggies in it, so that way you don't see those little flecks of black. But, you know, for me, this is totally fine. So I'm gonna stir this up one more time. Now we did start it with a little butter, and obviously this is a coated cast iron pan, so it is going to lend itself to really be nonstick. Obviously, if you're like me and you've got your great grandmother's cast iron skillet, you could also do it in there, because what we're doing with the frittata, because there isn't, you know, the difference between a frittata and a quiche is the pastry shell or the pie shell or whatever that vessel is to go under it. So we're using the pan as the vessel as opposed to the pie shell. So we are going to take this right there, add one more egg that was a little, didn't really want to get beat up. Always kind of cut the edge off there. So we're going to let it sit there for just a minute. Just enough. If you see, you're going to see a couple of little bubbles developing here. And while we're doing that, I'm going to bring in the secret weapon. So the secret weapon is boursin cheese. So boursin I use quite a bit. It's an herb garlic cheese. So I'm really just going to dot this in. And what this is going to do, it's going to add a little bit of backbone. It's going to add a little bit of creaminess. It also has a little of that garlic herb flavor to it. So it's really going to bring out a lot of those flavors for this frittata. Now you don't have to use cheese. When this comes out of the oven, we are also going to put a little bit of Parmesan on it. Now, another secret weapon that I use is a little bit of the blue smoke salsa. So since we're gonna kind of make this a little bit more Southwestern, I'm gonna pour just a touch in. And again, I'm not mixing it, because if we mixed it, then the whole mixture would turn a little bit of that kind of pinkish color. Not necessarily, you know, we eat with our eyes. So the first thing that you're gonna do when something comes to your table or when this comes out of the oven is you're gonna be like, wow, that looks great. Or you're gonna be like, that looks a little weird. I don't know if I really want it. So really eating with your eyes is the first thing that we do. So we gotta make sure it's aesthetically fantastic. So we've got this. So the bottom is baking just a little bit. We see a couple of dots here of the little bubbles coming up. That means the bottom is getting done. We're just starting it here. And then we've got our oven preheated to 350. So we're gonna take this pan, make sure that you have, obviously, the cast iron skillet is one big piece. So please make sure, safety first. Make sure you've got either a pot holder or a towel. You know, we use a lot of these kitchen towels. I can't tell you how many I go through. So we're gonna take this, you know, gently lift it up and put it in the oven. And you wanna put it in the middle rack, and then that's it. So the great thing about something like a frittata for an application, like, you know, if you're on vacation, or if you know you're in a situation where you're here at the CAMC Foundation Hospitality House, these kinds of things can be done ahead. They also are great because, you know, whoever it is, the family member can come in here, they can dice everything, they can get it done, they can throw it in the oven, and then we can spend more time with our family. So while the frittata is in the oven, we're gonna start on our dessert frittata, or there's a couple fancy names for it. a clafouti, a flugnard. I just like to eat it. So here is another rendition. And again, this is another thing that you can do at home. Obviously, we can do here at the house. It is very easy if you have the correct ingredients. So we have local peaches. Let me grab my knife here. So these are from Romney, West Virginia. And these are just now coming in season, and they are wonderful. So when you're cutting or slicing a peach, there's almost a guideline right here. So what I do is just kind of take my knife, kind of roll it, and follow along this kind of crack. Now, a lot of people want to do it in their hands. I always advise against that because there's been a couple times where I'm cutting bread or something and I've slipped right through and wham. So same thing, I just kind of roll it right along that and then just turn it. Now there's the freestone and the clings. These are freestones. Now they are, they say that because obviously you can pop the stone right out. The cling peaches, the stone really adheres to the flesh and it's a lot more of a pain. So we try to use the freestones whenever possible. So a couple of them, sometimes they'll grab. It's okay. If you find that they're grabbing and that you think you're going to pull most of the flesh out, just stop, put it aside, eat it as a snack. That's what I do, quite often actually. All right, so then we're just slicing. Now, and when we're talking about food, we're all the time, I can't say enough how much we eat with our eyes. Some things that are, there's shows out there now, Ugly Delicious. Absolutely, a lot of these things are not going to be the prettiest, but especially when we're talking about desserts. I was fortunate enough after culinary school, I decided that if I was going to open my own restaurants, which now I have two, actually had three, I wanted to know everything. So not only did I want to know the savory applications of eggs, but I also wanted to know pastry. Now the difference between what we're doing now and the pastry is a lot more science. You have to follow the recipes. If there's one thing that you learn from today is pay attention to the recipes when you're doing pastries. You can tweak a little things when you're doing the savory applications. You can add a little bit more salt, whatever. But when we're doing the pastries, when you're adding ingredients like flour, eggs, especially breads, yeast, things that are alive, and you really have to pay attention to the ratios, to the proper recipes, and to the proper techniques. So what we're going to do first, we've got our peaches already sliced up. We're going to take our dry ingredients, add those in. So actually, kind of funny, sugar is actually a wet ingredient, technically, but what we're going to do first is add our sugars and our flour. Now, as you notice, we didn't add flour to the frittata, but we are going to do it for this, only because we're going to need a little bit more structure, and also it's going to make it a little bit more, it's going to make it a little less eggy and a little bit more cake-like. So I'm going to just break this up a little bit here. Now, also, we hear gluten. Gluten is a super hot topic right now. There are tons of people out there that have celiac disease, which basically means you're allergic to the protein in the wheat. So what happens in a bread or pastry application is once you have flour and you add a liquid to it and then you add agitation, whether it's a whisk or a paddle or a dough hook or your hands, the human dough hook, you are developing gluten. Gluten is the elasticity that kind of holds the bread together, right? So it allows the bread to kind of form, it keeps the shape, it allows for those nice airy pockets in a wonderful ciabatta bread or a baguette. Now, the opposite is what you want in pastry. So you want to develop as less or as least gluten as possible. So when you are making cookies, they always say, cream the butter and the sugar together and then add the flour and just mix until incorporated, right? That way your cookies, or same thing with a cake, it is literally just mixing it until it's incorporated. That way your cookies or your cake aren't, don't have that bite. So we have mixed our flour and our sugars together. Always a little bit of salt. I know it sounds odd in a pastry application, but salt is a flavor carrier. So not only did we layer those flavors in our frittata, we are also helping to make the sweet taste sweeter with the salt. So I'm in a little JQ Dickinson Salt, always JQD. We're gonna add we're gonna put this aside. We're gonna do our wet ingredients. So we've got our dozen eggs. I've already gotten ahead and cracked about 10 of them. Crack your eggs. We'll put those aside. Take our whisk. I usually kind of beat them a little bit first, just to kind of break up those yolks. I'm gonna add our vanilla. Now, this is a really expensive vanilla paste that we have at the restaurant. So you could use vanilla extract, you could use vanilla bean. Now, if you're using vanilla bean, I would, obviously, the vanilla bean, it's super expensive, vanilla's super expensive. So take the bean, make sure when you buy it, if you can feel it first, you want it to be pliable, because once it gets hard, it's super hard to deal with. And then if you have the bean, they're usually about, 5 inches long. You want to take your knife and run it along the outside of the bean, but don't go all the way through it. So you're just opening it up. You open it up, you take your back of your knife and you scrape all of that inside vanilla bean out of it. So we've got our Yoder's honey, and I'm just going to add a tablespoon of honey. I'm going to use both of these to kind of help each other. Make sure I get all of this vanilla bean out of there. Again, vanilla is one of those gold in the kitchen. Saffron, vanilla, those kinds of things. If you drop that, that vanilla, that thing is a couple $100, which, someone that owns a couple restaurants really pays attention to. But, vanilla extract works great. Vanilla extract is basically they've taken a lot of the vanilla beans, they've extracted that vanilla flavor with alcohol and use it that way. So we're going to add so we got our eggs, our vanilla, a little bit of honey, both of our sugars. In the recipe, it does call for almonds, and I omitted the almonds. A lot of times you got to be careful. Obviously, if you're cooking for your family, it's one thing, but in the restaurant business, we always have to be mindful about allergens. So nuts are one of those things that are, one of those big allergens. So now, in any pastry application, you're going to add the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients, and that way, if you added your wet to your dry, you're probably going to have a little bit of the bottom of the dry stuff that's stuck. So now we're just going to add it in, and we're literally just going to mix it gently. So I'm using a whisk because I don't want any clumps in there. I'm not going to do it super vigorously. Now, in a lot of applications, you'll hear the word folding. You know, fold in your whipped cream. A lot of times if you're making a cake, you'll have your dry and your wet, and then it'll say fold in. Or if you're making a chocolate ganache and into a mousse, you'll take your ganache and you'll fold your whipped cream in. What folding in is gently folding with a spatula as opposed to a whisk to try to incorporate but not lose your volume of what you've already done. So you could really, if you wanted to make this, I mean, one of our tricks and one of those things that's like one of those chef tricks is when we added our cream, now we added milk to this, but if I were to make it in a 5-star restaurant or a super, super high-end restaurant, or what we would do at 1010 is we would take half of the cream, instead of milk, we would use cream, take half of it, add it to, and then we would whip the other half and then fold it in. And what that would do would just make it this light, airy, the texture of it would just be velvet in your mouth. So I didn't want to go through all that process and bring out a hand mixer or a KitchenAid or whatnot. So we've got this done. So what I've done instead of adding the nuts is we've got butter in the pan here. And you hear the words brown butter or beurre noisette, which just means brown butter in French. So what you do when you make brown butter in a pan, you've seen it in sauces and things like that, is you're caramelizing, or again, that Maillard protein browning of the milk solids in the butter. So in butter, you've got solids and you've got fats. So we have I've taken this and cooked it down just a little bit. And you can see that a little bit of brown, if you could smell it, it gets that nice nutty flavor, right? So if you wanted to, and you're allergic to nuts, but you wanted to get that nutty flavor, you can do a brown butter. So you don't want to burn it. You're just basically caramelizing those proteins or doing the Maillard browning on those proteins. Now, last but not least, and this isn't in your recipe, but this is another secret, I'm going to add just a touch of this Lens Creek lavender. And again, I can't stress enough, man, it's so good. They have a culinary lavender, and then they have just a normal lavender. The culinary lavender is a lot more mild, and it isn't soapy, it isn't perfumey. If you just put a little bit in there, you'll just be like, what is that? What is that little bit of flavor in there? If you do it for a dinner party, or if you're just here at the CAMC Foundation house and you really want to take your mind off of things, this is an awesome way to, I think food takes your mind off of stuff, right? So, all right, so we've got our pan, we've browned our butter, and then we've cooled it down a little bit. So I'm gonna add this in there. And you'll have a couple of clumps. If the brown sugar wants to clump up on you, that's okay. Don't worry about that too much. Now, this is where I'm gonna zest a little bit of lemon in there. This is something that, if you scratch a lemon, the zest or that outside peel is where all the flavor comes from. You get the acidity from the inside of the lemon, but the outside of the lemon is where all those oils are. And it's just awesome. So what we're gonna do is just brighten this up a little bit. So I'm gonna just take my microplane, and you can get one of these. You can use the other side of your grater. These things work really, really well. And what I'm doing is I'm rocking this back and forth. Now you could do it this way. These things are formed to kind of keep everything in here. So now a really good point to make is, so you see here the yellow part and the white part. So the yellow part is obviously what we want. The white part, or the pith, is super bitter. So once you get to the white part, stop. You know, you don't want to do more than just the yellow. And this, I cannot stress enough, it's like adding a little bit of the JQ Dickinson Salt to the frittata. The lemon zest is just going to brighten it up. It's going to make it taste so fresh. And these are the little differences between, you know, people say, well, I'll follow the recipe. And I didn't really, you know, it didn't come out how, you know, Gordon Ramsay said, or, you know, the Naked Chef said it was. Well, we're not going to let out all of our secrets, right? So what I'm doing is now I'm taking these wonderful peaches and I'm just going to try. Now they're going to sink a little bit, right? So I'm just going to try to arrange them and think about, try to arrange them to where they're all the round, you know, side is facing the same direction. They're going to kind of flow around. Again, we're eating with our eyes. I mean, you can even go the opposite direction on the next layer. I think that's what I'm going to do. And of course, you know, you're going to drop one or two. It's cool. So I'm just arranging these nice. We go back the other direction like the first layer. Fill in a couple of extras here. Get a little bit of that peach juice off. Then I'm going to dot the blueberries. So these fresh local blueberries, I'm going to take those and I'm just going to kind of fill in the blanks. And this is going to be, so, I mean, you've got your sugar, you've got your vanilla, you've got your fresh fruit. I mean, you've got your fresh peaches. You've got, I mean, this is just going to be absolutely wonderful. And this is something different. You know, that's one of those things. I think, you know, you see those big, the toques, the chef hats, the rumor or you know, the wives' tale was that all of those little ribbons or the little folds in the chef hat were how many different uses that the chef could produce with an egg, right? So the egg is probably my favorite ingredient. It's probably one of the most versatile ingredients. You can do savory. You can do everything from hollandaise to clafoutis with it. So I'm going to put this in the oven. Again, we have our awesome large Le Creuset, nice cast iron, kind of coated skillet. It's absolutely beautiful. We're going to put this in, and then we're going to see how our frittata's doing. Oh, it's looking awesome. So again, just be very careful. I have asbestos hands. This isn't super hot. I'm going to grab it, but please use 2 pot holders when you're doing this. Be very, very careful. Slide it right into the middle of the oven. Oh man, look at this. Then we're just going to peek on the other ones. So how do I know when it's done? That's a really, really good question. So you take your pot holder or your towel and you're just going to kind of move just a little bit. You're just moving it just enough to where it's, you know, you want it to be set. The outside is going to be more set than the inside. So on the frittata, it's going to jiggle just a little bit, but it's not going to ripple. It's just going to be a little jiggle, so it's set. With the clafouti, it's probably going to kind of mushroom cloud a little bit on the outside, and that's going to kind of come up, and then the middle is still going to be a little bit jiggly. It's okay. You know, that's where that creaminess comes from It might be a little messy on the plate presentation, but hey, who cares? All right, well, let's see a peek of the oven and see how these things are doing. Oh man, this looks perfect. So again, so here is kind of what you want, right? So we're going to jiggle it just a little bit. The inside still moves. You've got that nice little bit of that golden brown. You're still, it's not overcooked. If it doesn't move, you've probably overcooked it a little bit. So right when it comes out, we're going to take a little bit of our microplane, a little bit of Parmesan Reggiano, and we're just going to shave it just to add a little bit more depth of flavor. Got that earthiness, that saltiness. Again, the microplane I love because it allows it to be super delicate. And there is our vegetable frittata. Right, so we've got our frittata out. Let's check and see how, oh man, that looks awesome. So again, safety first. I mean, seriously. So not only do these awesome pans make it look fantastic, then you've got, you know, we didn't do too bad with the presentation. I'm going to sprinkle on just a little bit of powdered sugar because we don't have enough sweetness in there yet. No, I am pretty much sweet enough. So now we can enjoy. So, I mean, you saw this wasn't too hard. You know, I mean, there was egg, there was the frittata was egg, veggies, a little milk, a little cream. Saute it first. You add your egg mixture in there. You toss it right in the oven. You enjoy your family. You enjoy what's going on. Then the clafouti, pretty much the same thing. It was the sweeter version, 2 different sugars, some flour. You know, our local, obviously, all of our local ingredients. And now we can enjoy. All right. So here is our peach and blueberry local clafouti and our vegetable frittata. So thanks for joining us today at the CAMC Foundation Hospitality House. And thanks for coming on our fantasy food trip. Please don't forget to donate. We all depend on it, and it is a great cause. So thank you so much, and let's dig in.
Thanks, Jeff.